Good evening, everyone. We have a small group so far. I'm Sadie Everett, and I'm the director of the Regional Autism Advisory Council. And we have a great lineup tonight for the Advocacy in Action event. Um, we just have one attendee, right? Well, Amanda and I host this together. So I don't know if you're able to, the WCDD on your iPhone, if you're able to just drop in the chat like who you are and what brings you to tonight's event, that would be great. We just want to make sure we are hitting the topic to suit the audience. So just let us know. Um, oh, hello, Lori. Thank you. Great to see you, or great to have you part of this tonight. Um, so like I said, this is Advocacy in Action, and we host one of these events on the fourth Thursday of the month. And the intent behind this event is to have another opportunity for families, providers, educators, agencies to access information that serve students with disabilities. More of that school age is really what we're trying to target, um, just to improve outcomes for these students, these families, and ultimately just to set them up for a good future. So we are so glad you're here with us. Oh, Nahamani, thanks for being here. Hello.
Oh,
I was just saying this might be a small group, a small but mighty group, which is amazing. But thanks for being here. And we have awesome, awesome presenters tonight. We have Alyssa Otani Cole and Jenna Allen from OCALI Lifespan Transition Center. I was just telling them that this center has the most amazing resources, and we just need to get the word out so that people can start utilizing these resources and these tools, just again to improve outcomes for students with disabilities and set them up for a bright future. So, Amanda, we will be putting in the chat a feedback form at the end. And then also we have a Padlet that we store all of the information from every monthly Advocacy in Action event. So we will drop that in the chat. And am I missing anything else, Amanda?
I think a big one for us is that we won't be having events in November and December, and we'll be planning for next year. So we seek and welcome any feedback on topics that could be unique and helpful to our community.
Great. Awesome. Okay, take it away, Lifespan Transition Center.
All right, well, I will share my screen, and while I'm doing that, just thank you so much for having us tonight. We're excited to share about our resources. Let's see. Oh, I hit the wrong share button, I think. Let me try again.
And since we are a more intimate group tonight, like feel free to unmute and ask questions. If there's something you want us to talk a little more about or show, we can do that.
All right. Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, I can see them.
Perfect. All right. I never know. It's switching back and forth from Zoom to Teams. Well, again, thank you for having us. I'm Jenna Allen, and with Alyssa Otani Cole from the Lifespan Transition Center at OCALI. And in our center, we primarily are about helping people to recognize and achieve their best lives for adulthood, whatever that looks like for them. And we're part of a larger group. So if you go to our OCALI main website, you'll see that we have lots of different centers around different ages and topics, but we're all kind of united by this vision that people with disabilities have the opportunity to live their best lives, both today, tomorrow, and through their whole lives. And we're always looking for additional ways to promote access and opportunities for people with disabilities, and to also help to inform public policy and develop and deploy practices that help to link research to real life. So some of the resources that we'll talk about tonight really were created out of that need to help to get things that we know are helpful, that we know work well from, really great research perspectives into real life settings and into a format that's easy for people to pick up and use and get going with. So again, in our Lifespan Transition Center, we're primarily focused on ages like kindergarten through adulthood. When we first started as a center, we really were focusing more just on that traditional transition planning and preparation age of like 14 through 22. But as we've expanded and grown and formed new collaborations and partnerships across the state and nationally, we have expanded some of our work, as you'll see in some of our resources, to include some younger youth, so kids as early as kindergarten. And then we're also trying to build our supports in a way that they can be flexibly used for adults in all stages of adulthood too. So the first resource that we'll talk about, and I should have said right up top too, if you have any questions as we're chatting, because we are such a small group, please feel free to just, jump in and ask anything. We're happy to give additional details. We can even switch out of the slideshow and jump into the resources themselves online if you'd like a closer view of any of these things that we're going to talk about tonight. But the first one that we wanted to talk about is our Traveling Through Transition RAT card. This is just a really simple resource that we hand out at a lot of in-person events, but it's also available digitally, and it is composed of these two kind of main categories that link through these QR codes. And the first ones are for youth that are just kind of turning 14 or approaching 14. For those youth and families who are kind of new to transition planning, these resources can also be really helpful to professionals who are maybe just getting started, either as young professionals or as folks who are expanding their role. We know sometimes, especially in county boards, we hear of SSAs taking on roles that involve youth, and when they've primarily worked with adults, for instance. So these just turning 14 resources can be a great place to start, just to start learning the lingo, to see what's out there and to start understanding some of the concepts that are common in transition planning. And then the next QR code kind of goes in a little bit more depth to transition planning. So for those who have already gotten started, who kind of have the basics down, these other resources can help to build knowledge and build confidence as people move through the process. And then I'll hand it over to Alyssa to talk about the agency navigation tool.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. So the another resource we have is the agency navigation tool. And this is a packet to learn more about agencies that individuals and their families may be interested or need to connect with from that transition through adulthood years. And it can look like a very overwhelming document at first. I think it's a pretty hardy 13 pages or something like that. But if you think about it as really, it's going to give just a little bit of information about each agency that somebody may need to connect with. So in this example here, you see these colored rectangular boxes, and each one of them is listing an office that you may be interacting with or need to connect with. And so, for example, one of the options on there is Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. So in that packet, if you just flip to the page that you need, it'll tell you who's eligible. It gives you an overview of the services and kind of how to contact them and connect with them with websites and that information. So this is a way to get more of that information that's sometimes missing. I know sometimes we can come to the table and there's it can be very, very overwhelming for individuals, for families to know, who am I meeting with right now? Or who are you trying to connect me with? Or I thought I already saw them. And this is a tool that you can use to help say that was page 5 and we're on page 7 and kind of just give an example of how those agencies can be different from each other and but to try to keep it all in one space. And at the end of the tool, there are columns for each of the agencies listed where you can write in or type in, if you're using the computer, who your contact is or who your um, like if you're linked with OOD, who's your counselor that you're working with and their contact information and phone number. And as professionals, you can also use it as a way to just keep track of all those people that you're working with from different agencies. So that is um, the agency navigation tool. And one of these, this kind of goes along with it. It is the transition vocabulary crosswalk. Um, it's it's not utilized, I think, as much as it could be, but this does give a lot of really great information about the different vocabulary that everybody uses. I know we talk about all of the I's, right? The IEP, the ISP, the IPE. And so everybody is using their own jargon and it can be difficult. And so we built this transition vocabulary crosswalk to help just step out like what those vocabulary is. People can, it's almost like a dictionary that you can use to look up some of those terms. And so an example on the screen is what the different planning looks like for each of these different agencies. And I know it's tiny on the screen, but it's more to just give an idea of what you can expect to find. And so then the definitions will go through what that looks like for each department that's in there. So I'm going to
Melissa,
drop,
or I'm sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
but would you mind showing us on your website where to,
Mhm.
can you walk us through that? Because I was doing that on the side and I think I need a little help.
Yeah, I
Thank
think I
you.
can. And I'm dropping the links
Oh,
in
great.
for both of those
Oh, yeah.
are there.
Oh, okay.
Does that help?
Does. And I will add these to our Padlet that I linked also in our chat. So thank you.
Yeah, and we're going through probably 10 plus resources tonight.
Mhm.
So feel free to if you're like this one's too much for me right now, but I do really need this one. Like you said, so long as it's in the Padlet, you don't need to worry about like trying to like consume it all like right now.
Great.
Um, but
Thank,
oh, go ahead.
no, I was just saying thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still need me to show you or since we have the links, are we good?
I I think I'm good
Okay.
because yeah, I think this is fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and that actually kind of brings up a good point too. A lot of our resources are found in more than one place too. So we do a lot of our projects in partnership and cooperation with the Employment First Task Force. So many of the resources that you would find on our LTC webpage, you can also find on the Employment First webpage. But of course, in both places, we've got a lot of stuff. So if you ever have any issues finding stuff, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to connect you to what you need. Yeah, and speaking of that, these next two resources absolutely fall into that category. These were resources that we developed directly in partnership with Employment First. So the first one is predictors of post-school success. And this resource is primarily for professionals, although families might find it useful as a reference too. But it's really aimed at helping professionals to see how working together and how using best practices as multi-agency teams can help to support youth and families on their transition journey. So some examples of things that we have in this tool: we've grouped some of the predictors of post-school success by clusters. So these are things that research has shown help youth to have the most successful outcomes. So these are things like interagency collaboration, making sure that parents and families are involved when we're helping youth to gain work skills, making sure that they're doing that in community settings, and that they're also learning things like travel skills and social skills, these things that might not be exactly tied to employment, but are very important in kind of rounding out the skills that youth need to be successful in adult and employment environments. And then each section kind of breaks those clusters down. There are descriptions of what we mean by each term. We include examples of what these different concepts and predictors might look like in action. And then we provide resources to help folks figure out what they can use that already exists, so they don't have to recreate the wheel or start from scratch when they want to implement these effective predictors in their environments. And then lastly, at the end of the tool, we have some rating tools so that professionals can think about what they're already doing, and they can figure out what they're doing well, what they might want to build in or work on a little bit more. And this can also be a really helpful way of figuring out who might be missing from the table, especially in multi-agency collaboration, because we never want people to feel like they're just all on their own. A lot of the resources that we have, especially for professionals, are about supporting this multi-agency, multi-systems approach to transition planning. And we have this sort of companion resource that goes along with this, and this is the Effective Practices Guide. And this guide is really for anybody who supports youth in the community or on the job. This can be useful to parents and families at home, but also to professionals like job developers, job coaches, even paraprofessionals in the classroom can probably find some helpful tips in here. These are all practices that, again, like the predictors, have been proven by research to be effective for helping youth attain skills and become independent in these community and work-based settings. And like the predictors, they're organized into clusters so that users can kind of think about how these different practices can connect to each other. We find in a lot of cases, if people are using a couple of different effective practices, sort of layered and combined to fit each youth's unique situation, that those supports will ultimately be the most effective. So this example is the practice cluster that includes community-based instruction. So things like making sure that we're including service learning as part of opportunities for youth, providing and supporting internship opportunities. And for each cluster, we also, similarly to the predictors, have sort of just a little quick evaluation that folks can use to figure out what are we already using, what's working well, where do we maybe need to gather some more information to make our practice more effective. And then, is this a priority at this time? Because we certainly don't intend for every practice to be used in every situation for every youth. We want people to be able to pick and choose strategically based on what the youth that they're supporting need. So it's totally fine if if you're looking at this and you're thinking organizers and memory aids is not a high priority for this particular situation or this student, but maybe we do want to build something in, around some better chaining and prompting. Maybe we need to do a better task analysis as we're thinking about how we coach youth. And then lastly, there's a summary worksheet to capture all of this information in one convenient place at the end. So it's, meant to be another one of those guides that you can kind of jump around in, find what you need when you need it. But you can also look at it more comprehensively and think about, how do we want to start layering these practices into plans and into our overall professional or personal practice.
So this Priettes is kind of a newer resource that we have out there. I don't know if you've heard of it. This is a partnership we did with Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities to build a Priettes curriculum that is an option for their providers to use with students. And it consists of 5 categories. So there's job exploration counseling, work-based learning, workplace readiness training, instruction in self-advocacy, and counseling on post-secondary opportunities. While this is for providers, it is also just a free resource that's online that anybody can use with anyone. So you don't have to be a provider, you don't have to be a student receiving pre-ETs, but if you are interested in those things, that's definitely something that people can do. When you go on that website, Jenna just dropped the link. There is information on how to connect with OOD. There's also an introductory video on like what to expect. And each of these 5 areas, when you click on it, it goes to lessons, and this is what the lesson page looks like. And each of them has a benchmark, which again relates to OOD's provider manual. But it does also give you an idea of what's covered in those materials. So for example, that middle one where it says Ohio means jobs and interest inventories, there is even, we really try to arrange things from least complex to most complex. And there's even like a list of interest inventories, for example. It was really developed to be what's called a grab and go for providers. And this is mostly, I see the question in here, geared towards what OOD's definition of a student with a disability, which is 14 to not yet 22. However, even in the trainings, we had multiple people share that they were planning to use this with different populations, even adults population that they are working with. So there's a lot of good information that you may want to take time to check out. And you can play around and jump around on that site. You'll see that we tried to make everything a PDF as well. So if it's easier to just kind of, sometimes it's just easier to print. I like paper. Sometimes it's easier to print the thing and to see the thing and to hold the thing. Um, but we also have all of the materials are also available in a BRF file, so a Braille ready format. So it's accessible from not just maybe screen reader, and we provided a lot of different options for activities depending on students and what their kind of like where they are in their journey of things. And then we also wanted to make sure it was accessible for those that are blind and use Braille. So check those out. Again, they're free. All of this is free.
Yeah, and I just kind of piggybacking on what Elizabeth or what Alyssa was sharing about having all of these PDFs here. We tried to make this as easy to use for folks as possible. So you'll even find things like scripts for instructors or facilitators to use. And yeah, again, lots of things that are just ready to use right away. So personally, I think this is an amazing resource.
Yeah, I just clicked on the link and goodness gracious, there's links and the links and the links. Lots of resources. It's great.
There's a lot. And from the standpoint of a provider, some providers are providing all five, but some providers are only providing maybe one or two. And so kind of how we've Elizabeth Wheatmartian talked a lot during our trainings that you take what you need and you leave what you don't. So again, it can feel really overwhelming when you first get in, but if you know, for example, like let's just dive into some self-advocacy, right? Like that's for all of us could benefit. You'll see a lot of materials are going to start with just even vocabulary. So there's going to be a PowerPoint, and the vocabulary is arranged from least to most complex, and just a lot of other activities that are built in to those. It's a lot. But I, again, like when I print it, it feels less overwhelming for some reason. So
Yeah, I think there's just that confidence building too of like everything that you need is right there. So I think I even heard somebody in one of the learning sessions say, I would feel confident even handing this off to like a substitute teacher in a last minute situation, and they would have everything they need to do the lesson for the day with minimal prep. So we really did try to make it that user friendly.
That's a great idea, really. And then did you see Nahamani's question? Is there an age that pre-eds is best suited for?
yeah, so it's going to be, from the OOD lens, it's going to be 14 to 22. But to kind of what we had talked a little bit about, it's really anyone. So it just depends on not just student. I know we talk a lot about it being students in there, but it can be used with um, a lot of adults. So we had a lot of even mental health professionals that attended the trainings that said they were going to use it in their work with the individuals they were working with, even with like IPS and things like that, because it's that idea that maybe just because we're an adult or just because we maybe even have a degree, there are probably skills that we could have benefited from built into these. And so, and it doesn't have to be beginning to end. Like it doesn't need to be a book. You can kind of pick and jump to whatever you want in those materials for whatever the individual's doing. So if you know an individual that's like wanting to, like they have an interest in something, like job exploration is probably a good place to start. If work-based learning and workplace readiness training are probably going to be those ones that are going to be more about like community driven and trying to get some connections, experience, conversations with employers in the community. And so there's even like checklists in there for instructors or facilitators of like, if we're going to do like a work site tour, here's like the things we need to be considering. So um, again, it really is grab and go is really the kind of um, motto for those materials.
I would even say, and I think I've heard your team say this too, is that you're pushing to even start some of this earlier than 14. Um, I'm like looking at the workplace readiness training, and there would definitely be some appropriate lessons in there, for the
Oh, abs I mean, I'll
student.
be honest, there were times I would get stuck, and my oldest, he's 12, and I'd be like, does this make sense to you? It's my litmus for some of this.
That's
And
awesome.
so, yeah, I think um, it never hurts to kind of start these conversations and this idea that people can work and be involved in community and have those connections and how to do that. Because it just comes out then naturally in conversations um, that people can have with each other. Yes. Yeah. I see you said that you run everything by your 27-year-old. Yes. And to keep me real honest, I'll run it by my 9-year-old because she doesn't hold back. So,
I think that's a great point too, that a lot of the activities are short enough, they're easy to replicate and do again. So I think especially for, you know, kids who really do need like that extra background or like some extra time to think about things, it wouldn't really even be that difficult to do an activity again over time too. So maybe starting at 12, and then, you know, some of the answers might change even by the age of 14 as the youth continues to learn and grow and think about things differently. So yeah, it's really a great resource, I think, for
And in OOD world, the idea is somebody could receive any of these pre-ed services multiple times, to what Jenna is saying.
Mhm.
So the activities were built in a way that it is like person driven. So whatever the results are the result for them at that moment in time. But, you know, a year later, if they're participating in the service again, maybe they did a work experience, or maybe they are now more interested in something. It's going to look different for them when they do it a year later.
for sure. Well, one of the other new resources that we just launched this summer is this What Works for Work series of online modules. And you might be familiar with this title, What Works for Work. This was a set of resources that we had available on our website for the past, oh gosh, I think 5 or 6 years. They actually are still there. So if you're familiar with those materials, you love them, they're all available to access and download through the end of this year when we'll be sunsetting them. But what we were hearing from folks was that as much as they liked the slide decks and the handouts and the different resources, they were finding that some of the materials were kind of lengthy, and they were particularly finding that they were hard to use with just one person. So when we designed this series, we originally designed it for small or large groups of learners to complete together. And what we were hearing from the field was that people were often wanting to access the same content, but they were kind of on their own. And also that time was really limited. They wanted this in smaller chunks that they could access on the go. So that led us to make this series of short modules. Each one takes about half an hour to complete, and they can be accessed from anywhere. So they're designed to be used on a laptop or a smartphone or a tablet, and people can kind of jump in and out of them, again, to get what they need when they need it, but also because we know that, you know, having an hour for PD might be ideal, but the reality is I just need to fit this in when I'm on my lunch break. I need to fit this in when I am between 2 different job coaching sites. So the content of this resource really pulls from that effective practices guide that we talked about a couple minutes ago, and you'll see that reflected in the main landing page. There are 9 different models. A couple of the practices we lumped together, and then a few like social skills we made as their own module. But in each of these, they're available like all of our other resources for free. The user can go in, and we kept it a really pretty open format. So when you access each of these modules, you can take it straight from beginning to end, or you can pull up the table of contents and jump right to the part that you want to reference. So we wanted to build it that way, again, so that people could jump in where they needed to, but also to make it really easy to go back. If you're like, oh, I remember I saw, you know, this section about visual schedules, and I would really like to be able to use that with the learner that I'm working with right now. You can just really easily navigate back to that. And in each of these modules, we've tried to include a lot of interactive features. So for instance, in this section on visual schedules, we have these different tabs. This is a static image, but in the actual live interface, you would just click on each of these tabs and you get a quick definition of like, what is a first then strip? We have templates throughout each of the modules to make it easy for people to just grab what they need. Again, we don't want people to have to spend a lot of time creating their own resources. And then there's a nice visual example of this is what it looks like in practice. We also have a lot of features like, short vignettes and case studies for people to read so that they can kind of see, how would I apply this? What else do I need to think about if I want to use this for a learner that I'm working with? And then also places for people to, kind of stop and pause, record reflections, and think about where they might have encountered some of these practices and how they might be able to weave them in more fluidly to their work. So we're pretty excited about these. Again, right now they're available, and we're also in the process of applying for CEUs through DODD, and then also for the CESP CEUs that you can get through APSE. So if you know anybody who's looking to earn that certified employment support professional credential, or who needs some extra CEUs to renew it, that'll be even easier once we have those CEUs live. So a couple other resources that we wanted to highlight. This is another one of our RAT cards. Again, it's available both in print and digital. But this is another one that's primarily aimed at professionals. But again, it might be useful for parents to reference as they're going through the transition planning process as well. This guide, the age appropriate transition assessment and planning guide, it's a mouthful, goes through what effective AATA looks like. And you can sort of see this cheeky phrase that, there is no perfect transition assessment for every single student. We know that this process needs to be individualized, and that can be really daunting for busy professionals. So we've tried to break it down into this series of steps that aren't linear, but rather, are kind of part of an ongoing repeated cycle. And when you access the guide, it kind of walks through one case study to sort of follow, what does this look like when we get to each stage? And again, like a lot of our other resources, they're downloadable templates. There's some short videos to reference so that you can kind of get these concepts in short, easy to use chunks with the resources you need right there, and to kind of see how all the pieces of this fit together. And that just the fact that it needs to be individualized isn't really so daunting when you recognize that the process doesn't change too much. The specifics of what it looks like for each youth will be a little bit different, but each of these steps you can replicate and individualize for every youth that you work with. A lot of the resources that we have, I mentioned, live on both our OCALI webpage and on the Employment First website. So this is a section of the Employment First website that we reorganized a couple of years ago, and now it's already kind of time for us to revisit and reorganize. So if you visit this page a lot, you'll notice in the next year or so that some of the layout and features will change a little bit. But across this section of the Employment First site, we have lots of tools for multi-agency teams to use as they're starting to work together, and then also as they continue to work together. So we'll talk in a minute about some of the other work that we're doing to support these multi-agency teams, but really our goal with all of these materials is much the same as our goal with a lot of our other materials. We want to show how people can save time by planning together, by using resources and practices and leaning into predictors that are already shown to be effective. And then also, how do you take all of the work that you're each doing separately and kind of bring it together, even though we may still have to have separate plans due to rules and regulations from different agencies. For instance, if a youth is served through a county board, they'll have an ISP, and if they're at the same time receiving services from OOD, they'll still have an IEP, but we can, as a multi-agency team, work together so that those plans are in alignment and so that they reference and speak to each other, so that the services and supports that we're wrapping around people are really holistic and cohesive. And this can also really help youth and families understand and feel supported, knowing that everybody is kind of on the same page, and so that they don't have that sense of things being kind of disjointed, like the school's doing this, my job coach is doing this other thing, my provider is doing something completely different yet again. And one of the things that we're updating first in that suite of resources is our backward planning guide and tool. So one of the things that we're doing with this tool and resource right now is we're updating it to make it age neutral. We've heard from lots of folks that they have found this equally valuable for adults as youth, and we agree. So while the original version of this tool referenced youth and like other kind of terminology that's associated with youth and children, the new tool is age neutral. It just references people across the lifespan, because any of us can use backwards planning to start from where we want to end up and then kind of orderly put steps in place to get there. And just an example of what you'll find in this resource. So it walks you through kind of a series of questions. And this actually is a screenshot of the new resource that is already kind of age neutral. So one of the questions is just about, what do we already know about this person? So again, very simple, plain language, doesn't have to be completed all at once, but kind of a visual organizer to say, what do we already know about Jenna's preferences? What do you already know about what I'm interested in? What am I good at? What are my skills and strengths? And then what things do I need to be successful in my life? From there, we can get to the next question of, what else do we need to know? What did we kind of discover in question 2 that would help us build a more complete picture of who this person is? And how are we going to get those answers? Who else might we need to talk to? Where else might you need to observe this person? What might they need to try out to see whether they like it or don't like it, or are good at it or not as good at it? And then this can, be part of that whole process that builds up to ultimately what becomes our backwards plan. We start with the outcome in mind. So for instance, this might be an employment outcome, but it can also, be something that's more youth related, like having a successful experience on the sports team this school year, and then thinking about what are all of the steps discreetly that need to happen between here where I'm at right now and here where I want to go to help get me there. So it's really, it's not a complicated concept, but just having these guides to conversation and these ways to organize what we learn and what we talk about can really help people be effective and successful when they're working this way together. So I'm going to pass it back over to Alyssa to talk about multi-agency backward planning.
Yeah, so what we are trying to do as part of multi-agency backwards planning is really looking at it with starting teams, and we're doing it by county. So some counties have active teams, some teams have maybe done MAP before, but they're kind of like on their own now and they just keep it going. And it's this it is professionals from all these different areas that are coming together to connect and share information to make sure that everybody's on the same page, exactly like what Jenna was saying. Like, how do we work together so that all of these plans that they're having to do, whether it's with DD or school or OOD, don't feel so disjointed? And how do they feel more cohesive? And one of the things we've found to be really helpful is we have this 4-hour interactive training for MAP teams and other regional partners. And so um, where we are bringing everybody together to do this why map, why is it important, right? All of those, that evidence-based practices and research that we know about, and um, why it's valuable to them as professionals as well, and why it's valuable to the families. And so we have an interactive activity that we do, and it is put on from a multi-agency perspective. So we usually have somebody from county board, somebody from the schools, somebody from OOD and OCALI are all presenting together on how to make this look. Um, and, sometimes it's, I kind of call it the messy middle when you all have to come together, but people end up really finding value once they start meeting. So if you ever hear or are wanting in an area that is wanting this training, this is something we are able to do and set up and help connect with this kind of pre-training that we could do prior to MAP.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I was just coming from a MAP meeting with a brand new team this afternoon, and it was a good reminder to me that as confusing as this is for families, professionals often are also confused, and this kind of creates a safe space for people to say, I don't know that much about what some other partners do. I don't know how this works. So a lot of what we find in the early days of MAP teams is also just building that understanding across those agencies, because they're just as confused. They don't always understand why things work differently at another place. And yeah, we have a ton of jargon in our field, lots of different processes. And one of the things that can help with kind of understanding those systems, I think, is, it also helps them better realize what are the gaps? How can we fill those with things that might be local resources? Because a lot of times our MAP teams start with some of like the bigger state agencies, like DODD, like OOD. But when we kind of get down into like what's actually available here from just community organizations in my hometown that may have really very easy requirements to meet compared to some of these government systems, it can help people get really creative and on the same page about how can we as a community help the youth that we're all trying to support together. Sorry, Alyssa, I cut you off.
Oh, no.
Okay.
What Jenna said. Sadie also put a flyer in the chat of one that's going to be happening in Hamilton County. So if you're going to be there, I'll also be there and I'll be excited to see you. But when you really do feel the energy when you get the right people in the right room together, and they really are, um, one of the things that they do one of the kind of first things that the teams have to do is come up with their team's vision. And that's kind of like that reminder to them of like why they're doing and even in the like the meeting I went to today, somebody was like, hold on, I feel like I need to read our vision again, right? Because sometimes we just need to remember what that was, like why were we making this thing? Um, and they also we do 5 whys of like why are we doing this, right? I see the smiles. Yeah, the 5 whys. So it's again keeps you grounded in and brings everybody together regardless of where they're coming from. So um, it's always a great way to get some of that collaboration and even see who's missing from the table sometimes. Sometimes we see who do we need here? Because maybe that's maybe our next point of like outreach or something like that.
For sure. So we have just a couple more resources to share with you. one of these is some information about a project that we just started, oh gosh, I guess about 4 years ago. The Employment First Task Force in Ohio kind of recognized that one of the common barriers that a lot of families were experiencing, and then a lot of professionals too, is that even when we start at 14, even though that's, usually quite a few years before youth are ready to graduate from high school, it can still feel like kind of a rushed process to get in, all the conversations, all the thought, all the planning that we really want to be able to do carefully with every youth that we support. So we started on a shared initiative with some of our partner agencies across the state to create resources around early transition planning to help people have these conversations earlier and more often with youth. So we have some resources that exist on the Employment First website, and they're primarily organized into two categories. There's one called Start Talking that can be used by professionals and families. These just kind of link out to different frameworks, different activities that can be used. Some of the resources that we feature are things like Trying the Life course tools. We also have some links to just simple activities like creating dream and vision boards at home or in school to help youth just start thinking about the fact that they are likely to have an adult life. That might be a conversation that just hasn't quite come up yet. We know that, sometimes when you're in the thick of things as a family and kind of working through all the things that childhood entails, we don't take time to talk about, well, what comes next? What about when childhood ends and we all become adults? So we try to keep some of these light and playful just to start those conversations. And then also we have a section on there for families to use to connect for support. So some links and resources around just connecting to other families who have been through this recently to get their perspectives on what was helpful and what they wish they had known when they were going through the transition planning process, or things that did work really well for them when they were going through the transition planning process. So another resource that we're working on with this is expanding out some of the Trying the Life course resources. Again, I mentioned that sort of playful aspect to charting the life course through play. We're pretty excited about those materials, and we've kind of developed so much excitement around those that we're also making them appropriate for different age groups, because we're finding adults really enjoy being able to express themselves through play too. But it's just a little bit more of like a gentle, relaxed approach to thinking about these big weighty questions like, what do you want the rest of your life to look like? I don't know how I would answer that. So I really appreciate just things like, what would you like to have for dinner this weekend if you could have anything you wanted by a celebrity chef? Just kind of getting into those like more playful, easy questions. Another project that kind of came out of this early planning work is the OLAF, the OCALI Life Skills for Adulthood framework. We did have an assessment already that was more appropriate for older students, but it kind of led us to think about conversations that many of the folks on our work group have had around supporting youth, both in our own families and with other families, about, how do you figure out where each child is in their, skill development progression, and how do you figure out what might be a logical next step for them? How do I know what they're doing well at and what they might need some help with? And who else could we pull into our circle of support to help with that skill building? So that's what really kind of went into this framework, and we're actively revising it right now. We're going to be adding another section. We're testing it out with more folks. So more to come on that, but it is growing and evolving. But this is another one that's not meant to really be used front to back, but to just have folks kind of jump in wherever it makes the most sense to them. So you could either start with some of these skill groups where you feel like, I'm not really sure, how the youth that I support or my child is doing. Or, I think, maybe we do need some help with like safety skills. We've had a couple scary situations, and I really want to prioritize that and figure out how to support my kiddo to develop some of these skills. So when you navigate to each of these sections, they're kind of broken down into sub skills. You can kind of see, what things does a child already know how to do? What are they aware of? And then what are maybe some next steps? And each one's followed up by really easy to implement everyday teaching and support strategies that really just about anybody who supports youth can use. So it's a really nice opportunity to be able to bring in not just kind of your traditional circle of support, like parents and teachers, but even peers, older siblings, youth group leaders, coaches. And we have a tool at the end to kind of summarize what's a priority right now, who can, help with building some of these skills, and where and when can that happen without necessarily having to get into, kind of the more complicated planning that can go into something like a formal IEP plan. This can just sort of be an everyday way to have a more casual conversation about how can we help youth to get to where they want to go. And we also really heard some good feedback from families when we were first trialing this too, that it helped them appreciate all the stuff that they were doing well at home. Like, oh, I do that too. So for families who are feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm feeling a little lost, it was a good way to recognize we are doing good stuff at home. My child has developed some of these great skills, and for kids to appreciate that about themselves too, and to see like, these are the things that I can do. This is what I'm good at. And that can help to build self-advocacy skills as well.
I want to chime in here with the Olaf and just the earlier transition planning. I hear from a lot of families who get overwhelmed and don't know where to start. And this, just the everyday teaching and support strategies, is really helpful in having like very concrete examples. I was looking at one like assisting the child to use a planner or a calendar. A lot of times, the parents that we work with can be so overwhelmed, right, in a reactive mode that they just manage the calendar and they just handle it.
Mhm.
And by the time you're trying to get, an individual on board for this, and just in terms of transition planning in general, you're dealing with someone who's also going through puberty and testing boundaries and telling you everything that you say is wrong. And so like why not have this opportunity when they're still like open-minded and think you as a parent are the smartest person they've ever met, you know?
For sure. Yeah, yeah. And those were some of the fun things to develop with that tool too. It's a lot of things, too, that I think parents and families can do without having to take really hardly any extra time or effort. So even something like you're going to have to button your kid's shirt up anyways, just narrate it while you're doing it. Like, hey, watch, we're going to match this button up to this hole. We're going to match this button up. I was already doing it anyways. All I needed to do was just say out loud, this is what I'm doing. So I think, yeah, we tried to like just build in lots of those real easy, you can do this kind of strategies. Kind of speaking of things that are easy to use too, the Community Life Guide is another resource that lives on the Employment First page. We haven't developed all sections of this. This is a really nice collaborative effort between multiple agencies. And we are going to be working in collaboration with someone. There's a proposal out right now to and digital skills section has been added, as well as a moving to adult healthcare section. So the Community Life Guide kind of has these main topics. In addition, we also have like just staying safe and healthy in the community. And each one breaks these down very much in sort of the same way that the pre-ETS lessons do, into activities, lessons, interactive experiences that anybody can use with youth or adults just to help planning and start thinking about these different areas of life.
Another resource that we like to share are these Take 5 series, or these Take 5 webinars. And these are going to be, Jenna had mentioned before that, right, the time is valuable. So these are going to be quick, bite size, 5-ish minute, um, little webinars on a certain topic. It's just going to be able to dip your toe, get some information, give you some information on kind of what else you might be interested in. There's lots of topics that are covered on in these Take Fives. We've been doing them for a while, so feel free to like check out what topics are there. These ones, for example, on the screen are around benefits. And there's one about like, what is a benefits summary and analysis? How does Social Security decide disability? And so these are all included with if there's any links or resources or activities. But just those quick little 5 minute, just to give you some information, like even if there's a topic that you're thinking of, um, and you're trying to decide, do you need to go down the rabbit hole? This is maybe a good place to start with. Okay, maybe not right now. That's maybe for later. Or that, okay, no, I'm in the right place type of thing.
For sure. Yeah, and we try to make sure that we have people who are close to these topics and who do this work every day give the webinars. So generally, when our colleague Star invites people to participate in these, to kind of presents it as what, if you only had 5 minutes to talk about this important topic, what would you say people really need to know? So, we have, folks who come in from Social Security, for instance, to give these webinar topics. And then they also, each webinar comes with at least 5 additional resources that people can take a little bit more time with when they have time for a deeper dive on each topic. In a little bit of a similar vein, we also have a suite of resources that are all under this kind of title of The Journey. The Journey started out as another Employment First project. It lives on that website. This was a series of webinars that were originally launched during the COVID pandemic as kind of a quick-ish way for people to learn about critical topics for people who have more significant support needs. So this originally started as monthly webinars that would be about 30 to 40 minutes long with some Q&A. And we recorded all of those. They're available still to view on the website. So the videos themselves can be really helpful. But then as we kind of moved into life post-pandemic, the journey also evolved into a set of shortcuts. So these are little snippets from the webinars that are a little bit more like the Take Fives, like if I don't have half an hour for a webinar, what do I really need to know in 3 minutes or less? And then kind of along with those, we developed these toolkits to help people use additional resources that we've linked. We have some guiding questions, some suggestions about, great, you've watched the webinar. Now, how can you use this associated tool to get moving with this concept that we just talked about? So really to help people implement what they've learned and use it in real life. And then speaking of ways to help folks use things in real life, one of the last resources that we wanted to promote isn't specifically from our Lifespan Transition Center, but through OCALI as a whole, we have a really wonderful lending library that's available to anybody who lives in the state of Ohio. It's a free service where you can sign up for an account, browse our catalog online. You can see we have all different categories of things. It's not just books. We also have things like apps and software. We have lots of tech devices. We have assessments that professionals can use. We have some fun books that are available in different accessible formats. So we have things like dual reader kind of picture books where There's kind of your typical picture book for kids, but then there are clear Braille overlays on the pages so that both sighted and non-sighted children can enjoy picture books together. We have things like curriculum kits as well. So lots and lots of different materials. Some of them are available in like a electronic or virtual format, but most of them are actual tangible items. We'll ship them to you anywhere in the state of Ohio, and we provide free shipping to send it back to us too. So lots of great stuff that you can borrow without having to go out and buy it. Can't say enough good things about our lending library, and we're adding to it all the time. And last but not least, if you like the looks of some of these resources and you want to stay informed about new things that we're developing, new projects that we're working on, different presentations that we're providing around the state, you can sign up for our LTC quarterly newsletter. We won't bomb your email box with lots of stuff. We just put this out 4 times a year to kind of summarize all of the good stuff that we're updating, working on. And all of our other centers have newsletters as well. So if you go to our main OCALI page, you can certainly dive into the resources that are available from all of these different centers or sign up for their newsletters as well. You can do that at ocali.org. So are there any questions that anybody has that we didn't get to, or anything that's kind of bouncing around in your brain now that we've shared? I think it was more than a dozen things. We estimated a dozen at the beginning, but
Sure was. I was actively adding to the Padlet as we went. I was very busy the whole entire time.
we
You know,
forget
I
some
think
of the stuff that we have sometimes too. So.
they're great resources. And the Padlet might actually shut down because there's so many resources on there now, but they are great resources. One of the things that I come across on a regular basis in our area of town anyway is, really having the opportunity to get all these different agencies at the table, you know? I feel like a lot of times when we're planning an IEP, and I don't know, it always feels rushed. It feels like we're rushing and we're barely meeting the compliance date and things like that. So, I mean, number one, I think it's really important to start earlier, right? Just start earlier so you're not feeling frantic by the time you get there. But how do we get, OOD and DODD, boards at the table to make sure that they're involved? And then I guess the other piece, and maybe this is a lot of questions now, I feel like schools sometimes feel like they don't want to give up those activities because it's their responsibility, because it's a legally binding document, right?
Yeah. I would say to the, how do we get people at the table piece? That's been a huge benefit that we've seen from the MAP teams. I think one of the things that almost always happens is that if people didn't know each other and feel comfortable with each other before coming to the MAP team, which is very often the case, they kind of quickly get to know each other and they form those more personal, professional relationships with each other, which I think just frankly creates a little bit stronger of an impetus for people to show up when they're invited. If you've never met someone before, never had a conversation with them, and then you're suddenly getting invited, if you're busy, you might not make the time. But if you know each other, if you've maybe already had some conversations, I mean, that's the other thing that I see. I'm thinking particularly about one of my teams, where their team's amazing. They're really robust. They have about 16, 17 members from all different systems. And frequently they are actively, the members at the table in the MAP team have youth that they're co-supporting. So that becomes part of what happens in the MAP team too. If they haven't had time to catch up with each other, even if it's not sitting all at that table during the IEP meeting, they're still having a side chat. They're still staying after for 10 minutes to say, I'm so sorry I couldn't come to the IEP meeting, but can you catch me up? And they talk before. So I think that relationships piece, I just can't say enough about how helpful I've seen that be. in getting people to the table, is just creating that real connection between the people doing the work. I don't know, Alyssa, if you had anything.
Yeah, I think it's easy to stay siloed in the work that we do. And so when there is this kind of effort that is bringing people together, and it's for the same, everybody's there for the same reasons. Again, that map team I was on today, we identified that there's probably somebody that needs to be there. And they were like, "Are you going to reach out?" And I was like, "It would probably be better if one of who knows her? Like, let's maybe do that. Like, let's raise of hands, like, who knows this person?" Because me reaching out to them probably isn't going to be effective. I mean, I can, and I'm sure that they'll respond. But, and then somebody was like, "Oh, yeah, like we had lunch last week." And I was like, "Yes, you are the person." You are nominated and selected to reach out to this person, because there is more of that connection and that buy-in. It's almost like it's like that way of building community in a natural way through our work that we can't often do because of how everything is separated. And this kind of gives that ability to make that community.
Well,
And then I know you had
this
another
is not a
question. I don't
softball
remember.
question. No, no,
Okay.
and this is, I think, something that's coming up a lot lately. So,
Mhm.
are there tools? Do you feel like there's a specific tool or tools in here that can support a team in identifying whether or not a student should continue their education beyond their senior year or if they should graduate on time?
I don't know that I don't know that I'd say that there's a single tool, but I think in terms of process, I would probably kind of go back to things like age appropriate transition assessment, the backwards planning, because there's a lot of pieces to that. And it's a big conversation too. And it depends so much. So I think, I mean, I think rather than saying like, here's a resource that would help with just that decision, I'd probably lean into some of these resources that just support very comprehensive, true person-centered planning, and saying what holistically, what does this youth, what does this family want the next couple of years to look like? What's the big picture that we're trying to work towards? And then we kind of can back into that question of, and then how does staying in school or leaving school help to support that overall goal?
And that's the hard part that I think a lot of families struggle with. And if you have kids of other ages, you know that your kids don't suddenly they're not ready for adulthood at the age of 18. I mean, as a parent
Mhm.
of now a 23-year-old, I was like, this has been my lifelong lie. I thought when she turned 18, it was like, there you go, right? So differentiating between what a typical kid is still lacking when they graduate versus what's above and beyond and what a kid who has an IEP really needs. It's hard. It's a hard conversation, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that also kind of goes back to that multi-agency approach too. If we can really focus in on what specific needs are we trying to meet, I think then we can have that broader conversation too of where else could this be provided? Who else can do this? Because then we can also have that conversation about maybe it's traditionally, I think that kind of goes back to that second question that you had before too, of if the school, is kind of owning the process. That's part of what we want to see with the MAP teams, is that while schools are an amazing and invaluable resource, there are other systems of support that people can access. And that sometimes it's sort of the weird thing about our systems and some of these MAP teams too. There may be times where people can get the same or similar supports through multiple avenues. And then you have to evaluate what's kind of the best fit. Where do I want to get that from? And then unfortunately, there are these other times where there's a real need and nobody can quite meet it. And so I think the MAP teams are really helpful in both of those situations, figuring out, for instance, something like job coaching, who is going to be best equipped to support the youth with the type of job coaching and in the setting. But then, right, if there's another there's another need that none of those systems can quite meet, how can they all collaborate and get creative and figure out, how do we not just leave this youth and family hanging?
I
You know,
love
I
that.
gotta say, go
Oh,
ahead, go ahead,
I was
Chloe.
just going to say, I mean, the multi-agency collaboration just feels like it takes off this a little bit, little bit of stress from the family, you know, it
Yeah.
just lifting that up a little bit. And I love the idea that this is building community. And I do feel like there is a movement, you know, in this work and in our region, that building community is really important, and building these relationships of trust are really important, and not just for people with disabilities, but for everybody. And I think, you know, you OCALI is scratching even more than scratching the surface, but you guys are really getting to it and creating some amazing resources to push people in that direction.
Well,
Yeah, and
thank
I
you.
think,
That's our goal.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, Amanda, your question also makes me think about, right, like there's not one answer, but I know that whole backwards planning piece is so person-centered driven that it's really helpful and really valuable. Um, you know, I remember somebody telling me once, like a goal without a plan is a wish type of thing. And so if
Mm,
we're just wishing that when they graduate, everything's good to go, um, to quote a family I worked with, they said it felt like falling off a cliff. So if we're not,
it sure does.
yep, so if we're not doing that planning, like you're saying, and having the right people there when they need to be there earlier in the process, um, it's just a wish. And so then it is more difficult to plan when you're closer to the end of that school piece and school side of things.
Awesome.
Is
Well,
there
oh, go
a
ahead.
resource that like you guys really liked, or do you think you'll kind of look more into?
I just want the time to be able to use them all.
I
I know.
know, right?
You know, but yeah, I have specific, clients and students that I work with that I know, like I'm prioritizing, with one kid, it's a vocabulary issue. So the pre-ets resources and those vocabulary resources are going to be really helpful in just getting him to even know what I'm talking about, right? Like
Yeah,
self-advocacy, what? Like what does that even mean?
yeah,
That's a new word to him. The backwards planning I've loved. I've loved that forever. And I use, just so you know, this is a wild and crazy thing, but I use these tools with people in Kentucky. What? I know, don't tell anybody, I know. I'm a wild and crazy person. I also use them with young adults who are in job and family services, who are in the foster care
Mhm.
system.
Sure.
And if you've heard me ever talk about this, like I feel like every kid who is in foster care really needs specially designed instruction for this transition into adulthood. And Charting the Life course has some tools, but we're still not really being intentional about that. Like they have less resources on the other side than most of the families that we're working with, right? They're really on their own. So I feel like we should be investing in the youth that are in foster care, especially if they're in high school and they are still in foster care, So I've used all of the tools. I download things on it all the time. I think for a lot of families, it really is about like when I'm adding things to the Padlet, like where do you start? Like where do you even get started? So, what's your favorite tool, ladies?
Nahamani has a good question in the chat.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, okay, I want to know what can maybe we could
mm-hmm.
talk offline.
yeah, I I think also sort of zooming out on that one a little bit, this is something that we hear somewhat frequently, and it varies so much in different communities and across the state. But yeah, I mean, I guess just being candid, that's not an uncommon thing that we've found in some of the counties that have started MAP teams where um I guess the nicest way to say it is that, yeah, where the initial group of people who kind of come together have a little bit of a shared idea or understanding of this system over here is the problem. And, this system, I mean, it might be the school, it might be the county board, it might be OOD, it might be, but it's sort of like, we could solve the world's problems, but we've just, got this stick in the mud over here and they're hard to work with. So I think I know I feel like I'm just sort of playing a broken record, but it's a little, it does go back to that collaboration and that person piece. I'm thinking particularly about a team that I was working at where I was working with, where I feel like it just made all the difference in the world that the actual individual on their team from an agency that lots of folks had experienced barriers to working with. She is just a delight. She is a wonderful person. And I think it just went miles for changing that dynamic and showing like, okay, I've at least got this one person who I know by name, who is delightful. And, like I can call them, be like, hey, nobody else at your agency will call me back. Can I do something? So I think it does. Yeah. Like persistence is big, but then also, I guess, even if there's not a formal like map team structure, finding, I think that's something I've come to believe. I guess that's just a Jenna Allen opinion, not an OCALI opinion, but I really do. I think there are good people in all of these places doing good work. So even when you're kind of running into walls, staying persistent and trying to find that and find that person.
Yeah. And I know that and some counties, I mean, personalities are personalities. So if you don't
Yeah.
jive with one SSA, you might jive with another one. And I know that a lot of the county boards will help foster that. Like, okay, this isn't working out with this SSA. Well, let's try so and so. It might just be, again, it's building that relationship of trust, building that community. So yeah, I mean, I would love to help with that too. So yeah.
I didn't realize I came off mute, but since I'm off mute now.
Welcome.
Well, this has been amazing, everyone. Small but mighty group. I loved it. If you are joining the recording, please visit our Padlet that is also linked in our website. So I'll just make sure that all of that is available if you are watching the recording right now. Thank you so much, Alyssa and Jenna, and for our guests attending tonight. So many resources, so many great things. I think it's just continuing to know what's out there and being a resource to these families. So appreciate you all.